And weirdly, they did the outer cut before they did the inner circle, so the piece was moving during that last bit. And then I scaled it up and put it into copper just for fun. And then I'm quickly finding out where you end up spending all your money on these, which is buying end mills and chamfer tools and engraving bits and things like that. So I'll probably be hitting up Chris for good ideas on where to buy aluminum stock, but this is my new hobby that I plan on learning more about. That's about all I've done with it so far, but my plan is to actually do some sort of three-dimensional relief style plaques, or almost like coin style things, and maybe some other projects, we'll see. But that just arrived, and that's how far I've gotten on it. That's what I've got.
That's excellent.
Did you break your first bit yet?
Not yet, surprisingly. I did use the 1/32 flat end mill, and I thought for sure that puppy was just going to shear right off. And I'm terrified to put the 1/64 in there. But the big learning curve, and it actually syncs up pretty well since I'd already decided to take next week off, is learning Fusion 360 in order to try some projects. They have a few starter projects, including that ruler. That one uses their SVG support, but they have another little like outdoors knot holder kind of aluminum thing that starts with a Fusion 360 model, and they teach you how to export the tool path. That's the interesting part. Like, I knew a lot about 3D modeling from 3D printing, and I was pretty good at creating 3D models for 3D printing. But the new thing to learn with a mill is this additional step between the 3D modeling and the milling, which is the toolpath creation. And there's a huge amount of, like, I wouldn't call it black magic, but there's a lot of choices. Like, do you want the adaptive or the circular or the blah, blah, blah? There's all these weird names for them. And so you have to study those, know what they're good at, know what they're bad at, and pick the right one, and kind of build up all of these steps too. That's the other thing with 3D printing, is you just hit go and your part comes out. Whereas with the mill, there's tool changes, there's setups, and if the part has a back to it, you have to, mill part of it, flip it over, re-index so that you're lined up, and then mill the back of it. I have not done one of those yet. That'll be educational, I'm sure. It's too bad Scott's not here, because he's an old pro at all this, right?
If you're talking about me, I am not an old pro.
Oh, you are. You are.
I'm an old amateur.
Oh, okay.
But I would say, if you're going to be cutting a lot of aluminum, look at getting a little puff of air by your bit to clear the chips, because a lot of regrind on the aluminum is really sort of smeary. That way.
I agree. I should get an air thing. I guess it's not pictured here, but they do sell this little fan that you can put on the bit. It only fits on the 1/8 inch bits, not the 1/4 inch bits, but it produces a really nice amount of downforce and blows the chips out of the way of the mill.
Is the spindle air cooled or water cooled, or?
I think it's air cooled. There's no liquid in this thing.
Yeah, I was just curious. Oh, okay, there we go. And then what size collets do they have available? Are they all English, or they're metric too?
It's a standard thing. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I have a 1/4 inch and an 1/8 inch collet. But well, that's about all you can see here. This unscrews and the collet clips into this bottom piece, and it's kind of, I don't think I have a picture of it.
I bet it's a ER11.
Here, let me zoom in on this. Yes. What's that say? Yeah, ER11.
Yeah, so you can get metric ER11s, and then you can buy metric tooling, which is really cheap, like from AliExpress or Alibaba. Because the English tooling, of course, is cheaper in the US, but there are fewer manufacturers of it. And then the rest of the smart people in the world use metric. And if you had a weird collet size, you wouldn't be able to get metric collets for it. But since you have a ER11, you can do it. Yeah.
Davie got a new.
Thank you, Davie. Jim's learning. He's getting closer to learning this whole meeting thing. Anyway, if you got ER11, you can get metric collets and you can get metric tooling. And so you'll find that metric tooling is really cheap, and a lot of really high quality stuff is available.
Cool. Thanks for the tip.
Yeah, most of the stuff is CNC ground anyways. And so if you have a big machine that's manufacturing tooling, it's making tooling. I mean, it's hard for the machine to not make good tooling ish. I mean, of course, there are certainly possibilities, but most of the time, if you buy tooling from wherever you can find it inexpensively, it'll work just fine. The bigger issue you'll run into this with is what Scott said, is you end up recutting a lot. And so recutting will dull your stuff a lot faster than it will if you're not recutting. And then taking so many small passes because you can't take a big bite, which is fine, just means that you end up using the leading edge of the flutes a lot more than you would if you can go deeper and cut thicker. But it's not going to hurt anything. It just means your tooling will wear out a little faster.
Yeah. If this turns out to be, you know, tons of fun and profit, someday I'll upgrade to a bigger machine, which actually reminds me, right before this came in, a friend of mine sent me a picture. He works at Tormach, and apparently they had a employee garage sale, and he got an awesome deal on an 1100, which is down in his basement now. So, you know, it's like, what, 6 times bigger than this and can bite titanium. So
I'm sure yours can cut titanium too, just a little slower.
very slow. So, you know, I did dither over the fact that like Brie Pettis is involved in this. And I know in the maker community, not a lot of people are fans of Brie's anymore. I still have his cupcake CNC on proud display downstairs. And so, you know, I like the machine and what they've done with it. I hope that too much of his personality doesn't come out on it, but so far I'm pleased with it. I'll keep you in the loop as I make things.
Brian, did you want to? Brian's got the other machine that they built. I think is it called an other mill or not an other mill? What is that thing?
Yeah, it was the PCB thing that they talked about.
Yeah, other mill was the one that they acquired and then turned into the PCB mill.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it was. But
Did you see Tormach has a robot arm now?
only with the chainsaw on it. You can't put anything else on it. Chainsaws only.
That was awesome.
So, Dennis, you mentioned you were trying to find cheap stock. As things get back to normal, when we start doing the trash to treasure recycling reclamation again, you're welcome to all the scrap stock you can put your arms around, as long as you take all the rest of the parts off of it before you leave.
You're awesome.
So
I would totally do that.
And we could even, you know, I don't know, we could figure something out. I mean, because we just take stuff apart and scrap it. So if you find a slab of aluminum that you really like, I don't care.
Very cool. Thanks.
If you want aluminum that's about 1/2 inch or thicker, it's actually very available, but thinner than 1/2 inch gets harder.
That sounds weird.
There's a manufacturer in town that gives us scrap, but they only make really big stuff. So they only have really thick metal. They don't have thin metal. So like if you want, you know, 1/8 inch thick, like they're not something that they use. But if you want 1/2 inch thick or 3/4 of an inch or 1 inch, like all day long. The other interesting one is as aluminum gets thicker, the scrap value goes down. So they get very, very, very little for the material. Oftentimes they give the aluminum to the scrapper for free in exchange for picking up their steel, because the steel doesn't have any value. So it's kind of wild as you get to become a large company and you have like way too much material to ditch. They actually end up nearly paying to dispose of it, depending on kind of what metal rates are, just for the transportation and handling fees.
Well, that's cool. The one thing moving from additive manufacturing to subtractive is suddenly you have to think about the size and shape of your stock. And if you put something in that's even like just 1/4 inch taller than what you need, if you're biting it off 1/4 of a millimeter at a time, you're spending like an hour just to get down to finding the part inside the stock, right? So I feel like I need to invest in some nice aluminum blades for my bandsaw in order to get things closer to the desired height, at least. The width and depth is, or X and Y is not bad because you're cutting it out, but the Z, you don't want to have to eat through 1/2 inch of material just to get to your part. So I think I have some bandsaw blades in my future. But aluminum is not the only thing. I want to experiment with a few different materials, some Corian, and I want to learn to do some resin casting and then carve things out of resin or make molds to pour resin into. So we'll see.
Any other questions for Dennis from anybody? Otherwise, he's got to go to his work meeting. You don't want to let him go to his work meeting.
That's not for half an hour.
So
Exactly.
do they ever hook up a vacuum system instead of an air system with if you're just cutting aluminum?
It's got some ports on the side of it, but I don't know what they intend to do with those.
Okay.
You know, the big machines all have water spray cooling kind of thing going on, like my friend's 1100.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
I'm
big
gonna-
one on routers is to use an alcohol mist. So if you run alcohol mist, it'll keep the tooling cold, but it doesn't accumulate because it evaporates. So you just run isopropyl, which, you know, 9 months ago, suggesting to use isopropyl for anything would have been blasphemous, but I imagine the supply has bumped back up again. Otherwise,
I
you can just
just-
pour Everclear in there and that'll work too.
Yeah, I just saw a video and the guy was saying that. He said a year ago this was impossible to get, but now you can buy it and it's not a problem. And the chips all come out dry, so you don't end up with a whole pool of stuff. But the question I had, and he didn't address this in his video, is isn't an alcohol mist explosive?
It could be, but you'd have to, like, if you're running 80%, you're not going to have any problems. But yeah, if you
You
ran
have this-
99% and blew it into your motor or something, maybe.
It has to be, well, it has to be the right oxygen fuel concentration. So if you put a bunch of it in, there's a good chance you're above the explosive limit. So,
Until you
I mean,
get
it-
there.
well,
But at
it's
some
just,
point you're passing through that.
well, that's why you don't have anything ignition when you pass through that. But
Yeah, don't do that if you're gonna play with titanium. That's the only time I've seen them catch fire. So
I mean, yeah, then that's titanium. So that's gonna be nice and bright.
Yeah. you
And
could
metal
get
fires are
sparks
so
going.
metal
It'd be
fires are
nice
so
to
much
see,
fun.
To see Datron's boilerplate warnings for their, because they do that exclusive alcohol coolant system. But it'd be, yeah, fun to see what they say about it.
Duck.
Yeah, maybe you'll have to put a couple of 120 millimeter computer fans, you know, just to blow enough air through that the alcohol vapor is leaving. But yeah, the only time we've ever used it is on the CNC routers, because the router, the like 24,000 RPM is way too high, even with a single flute cutter. And if you try to reduce your RPM, then you get in danger of stalling the motor. And so you need to be taking large chips of the router too, and then it chatters. And so the easiest thing to do is you just sit with a spray bottle and spritz by the cutter while it's cutting. You keep the cutter cool enough, and then the alcohol won't, or the aluminum won't stick to the tool, and then it just keeps making chips and evacuating them. But yeah, the air blower works well too. But yeah, Sean, the problem with the vacuum is there just isn't any lift with it because the chips are so heavy. Because I know Scott and I certainly in the past when we were setting up the mills a long time ago, tried setting up like a vacuum tool that would come down by it, and it worked great for wood, but it didn't do anything for aluminum because the aluminum shavings just kind of stick to each other, and they kind of turn into big caterpillars, so they're really hard to lift up. But yeah, if you ever do wood or something to keep it off the bearings and to keep your bearings lubed well, it's nice to have something evacuating at least the dust that's coming off.
Speaking of vacuums, I was thinking about getting one of these, not that exact one. Shoot, I don't see the right company, but it's this thing, a cyclone thing that goes on the top of a 5-gallon bucket and you run the shop vac through it, but it does the cyclonic separation so that your filter stays cleaner longer. Yeah, it looks something like this one. Just Deputy. Does anybody have any experience with those?
I've got a couple of those units and they do work well. I use them for aluminum chips, and so probably exactly your application here, and it works pretty good. Sometimes the hose still gets clogged, but I've got coolant on my aluminum chips, so that's what helps dried coolant clog together a little bit. But for the separation part, it works really well. I've got one Dust Deputy and 2 off-brand versions. So
Nice.
Don't buy the Home Depot one. It doesn't work at all.
okay.
Home Depot has a bucket guy. It's a really shallow version of a Dust Deputy, so it doesn't stick up nearly as tall, which makes the tooling way cheaper. And the Home Depot one works terrible. But I have the one that I put out in the text from AliExpress. I have a couple of those ones, and I have one of the Dust Deputies, and they both work well. Yeah, that orange one on your view there, that guy doesn't work at all. Don't buy one of those. But these other black separators work fine. They aren't as fun because you can't watch the stuff spin around. But yeah, and all the vacuums at the shop, we have cyclone separators, and they work very well.
For a little bit more than this clear-ish well, white, I should say. They sell one that's, I don't know if they call it anti-static or less static, but apparently air moving through a pipe creates some static charges. Is that something I should be concerned about? Should I pony up for the anti-static one?
The Dust Deputy comes with a little strip of aluminum foil that you're supposed to put, like tape that you're supposed to put on it, and it immediately tears off. But I have never seen really any static buildup with our vacuums. I've definitely seen a ton of static buildup with our big dust collectors, but not the vacuum cleaners at all.
Cool. I guess this
might
one
be-
already is the anti-static one. All right.
And this might be connected to whether or not you're gonna, vaporize alcohol into your chamber before you turn your vacuum on.
That's a good point. Make a little Van de Graaff generator next to the alcohol. Love it. Well, I've used up enough of your time picking your brains. Thanks for all the ideas.
Woodcraft in Monona has the Dust Deputies, as does Menards, if you're looking for one locally.
Oh, cool. Good to know. Thanks.
And then, you can't blame me for buying a bunch of extra stuff that you didn't need from Woodcraft while you're there, so I don't want to hear about it, but fair warning.
Also, Chris, didn't you just get that giant 3D printer fired up? Like what, can we put in orders now or?
If you want like one cyclone separator per 2-day period and you want it to mostly seal but mostly leak, yeah, we can definitely do that. Oh, and all the dust is going to stick to the inside of it. But yes, we could probably swing that. On that note, Dave, you want to take it away?
I'll give it a shot. Let me see how I always forget how to share my screen on this thing.
It's the giant green button at the
Yeah, I
bottom.
see it here. Okay, hold on a second. So this whole thing started when we were on vacation a long time ago. So I'm just Chris asked me to do a part about this tool. The tool sucks. I'm not gonna spend much time on it. So I'm gonna tell you about the rest of my project. This all started when we were on vacation a couple years back, and the sewer lids in Budapest looked really awesome. And so as we wandered around, I got bored and I said, oh, I want to get a crayon rubbing of that, which has spawned into what we do on every vacation because it gives me something to do and it's kind of fun. So like here is something I found in Portland, and I saw what resulted are these two kind of rubbings, and I've got dozens of these. These are just kind of the examples that I'm using today. So ultimately, if we're the plan is to frame these all in the house, and we want them to look kind of different and not all be, in square frames with black, paint and whatnot. And so my brother and I got together and decided to build circle picture frames because I can't find anywhere to buy any. So I don't have a lot of pictures apparently of this process, but this is our first go at it. And so what we did is, you can see in the picture here, we cut 115.25 degree angles, 115 degree angles into chunks of 2x4, and then glued and banded them together to make these octagons, and then clamp those in and used his like Lexan router compass. And if you look over here, it's kind of deflecting way down. It has no kind of structure to it, which resulted in a lot of tear out, especially in the larger ones. So, a couple thousand holes later, and I built my own router compass in, I think it's 16th inch derivations from 4-inch radius all the way out to like a 11.5-inch radius, which gave me a much cleaner cut and a much more repeatable setup. So I made a bunch of circle frames. I think we have 4 total. As you can see, the one closest on the frame here, the edges are rounded over because of all the blowout. And so I just had to put like a 1/2-inch round over on it just to clean up that edge. And then the one in the back has got a nice crisp corner because it's got the pretty metal, router compass. So anyway, make a circle frame, you need circle glass. So last week sometime, my brother and I got together. And so I replaced all the windows in my house several years back, and I harvested all of the big glass from the big glass panes. So they're all like, around 2 feet by 3 feet square. And I had a pile of them in the garage, and it's all 100-year-old, or well, half of it was 100-year-old glass and half of it was whatever they replaced in the years in between. But anyway, I wanted to cut I need circle glass. So using this kind of, we went through a variety of methods. At first, we tried to build a compass for a glass cutter using like a kind of an industrial suction cup I have, and then just like a piece of wood with a hole drilled in it. And so we could scribe the circle, but then we couldn't break the glass out, or it would partially break and then it would, you know, the crack would go cattywampus. So after like 10 or so sheets of glass, I finally landed on just a good old fashioned kind of octagon method. So using, and this is just kind of a standard way to break glass here. And what I ended up doing is, you know, with like 14 or so cuts starting in the corner of the piece, I was able to make a, you know, relatively a circle. And so again, this is just to show anybody that hasn't cut glass before kind of what the technique was. And this is basically what I did for like 4 hours that night in, you know, with varying levels of success. And so like any good project, we spent all this time doing this and having no idea what we were doing. And then almost immediately, so there's the straight edge there. And you just do that a bunch more times, you end up with, you know, mostly a circle. And then I also have a diamond grinder for stained glass that I use to kind of clean up the edges. So here is what it looks like when you're done with, you know, kind of these harsh corners here. And then after, hold on. After the sanding or the grinding on the corners, you end up with this, which is fine because it's all hidden behind the, you know, the wooden frame. So these are the glasses, the piece of glass, and then these, here they are in the frames. So the frame hides all the corners, so it doesn't really matter. So then naturally, like 10 seconds after I get done just plowing through glass in my garage, Chris sends me this picture of some QVC tool. This is like 1,000,001. I don't even know what all these things are. In this little metal bit is like a carpet cutter. This is like some sort of sharp wheel. This glass cutter end comes out and turns sideways and goes in the other side. There's a knife sharpener and just who knows. It's a bunch of nonsense, quite honestly. So, you know, in an attempt to show you guys how this thing works, I took it apart. I tried to put, I need to get this piece here into this hole over here. And the whole thing, like these pieces, all that's all just in the box. I don't even care about that stuff anymore. That's all nonsense. So this is what you get, you know, when you're done. And you get like a 4 or 5 inch radius for a circle cutter. And I don't know if you read the instructions real delicately, but it says, you know, place pivot on pivot point and with equal pressure, turn instrument 360 degrees. I don't know about your guys' arms, but mine don't do like all the 360 all at once. So that was the tricky part. And then it says lightly tap center with hard object. That's the end of it. That's the sage wisdom from, you know, China or wherever. So I gave it a shot and I tested out a few pieces and I basically got just as good of results as I did with my homemade compass, except for this one, as you will see, you know, it seems to work fine. And then when I got done with this first cut, the suction cup has no sticky to it. It suctions and then it just slops around. And so the cut was relatively okay until you get to the ends that don't meet up. So I tried it again and it kind of worked. And I'm just going to kind of skip it. I put a bunch of videos in here. So the first one got all cattywampus. So I did it again in the same piece of glass, same results. It just sucks. This tool sucks. I don't know why I'm telling you about it, but Chris asked me to. So but I'll show you. So the light tap in the center was the tricky part. Because this is also photographing glass is like a weird specialty that I don't have. So you probably can't see it here, but the crack arced here and then cut through the circle where the circle cut actually goes around here. So I ultimately decided to just beat the shit out of it and see what happens. So here's the results of that, which kind of worked. You can see it starts to crack on the lines, which is kind of okay. But here in about 5 seconds, everything's going to go to heck in a handbasket. So, oh yeah, okay, this is the one that actually succeeded. I did get one small piece of glass out of this, of like the dozen times that I tried. So there's that piece, which actually panned out pretty well. And I took it out. Oh, I don't show you that. The cut was reasonably well. It would have totally been hidden by the frame. You know, if you're trying to do a showpiece, I don't know what the trick is. So yet again, here's just a whole bunch more attempts. Oh, this one's the good one. You can see how awesome this suction cup is if you watch as I try to move this thing around. There it is, right there. And so it just gets all cattywampus. Ended up with this. There was a good one. Oh, so anyway, at some point, the lightly tap in the center, I figured out that this whole process is meant to cut an inside hole and not an outside circle. And so the first whack of the hammer turns out great. I was actually trying to break the circle at this point to end up with a hole, and then everything goes to hell in a handbasket. So that's pretty much how it went over and over again. Anyway, that's all broken. None of this works. Cutting circles. If you ever need to cut a circle, I strongly recommend just the octagon approach. I don't know what this is. I'm not going to, suffer you through. Oh, this is where I tried to cut it out of a square and get the edges. If you can see down here in the corner, I tried to just cut the corners off, basically, using the radius. And here I am trying to break it, and it barely cut. And then again, everything looks good, and then it goes to hell in a handbasket. So anyway, ultimately, I'm about to, now I got to figure out how to cut a circle mat for my, for the frames. And then I get to hang a couple of these up, and once for my brother and once for a friend, out of town and all that. So it's been kind of a fun project, and I'll, kind of keep you guys updated as I progress on. And that's about what I got.
Did you try putting it underwater and using scissors? So I have actually done this with like stained glass stuff. It's so weird how it works, but you can use scissors and just cut it like it was a piece of paper. With no scoring. Correct. Well, so the closest we did, the next closest to that we did was the vice grips that are for flashing, to where it's got the 3-inch wide jaws. And we were able to kind of break it in a systematic approach, but then eventually it just goes wonky and kind of takes a 90-degree. So I'll try that. So you just have a tub of water, you just slide it in there with the Sharpie circle or whatever and just cut it out. Okay, I'll give it a shot.
So does anyone know if there's any truth to I had always heard that old glass doesn't break well. Like it's really hard to work with. Did you try a new piece of glass, Davey? Yeah, so of the glass that was harvested out of my house, some of it was obviously replaced, in the last couple of decades. I don't have any brand new glass, but we tried like 100-year-old glass and we tried new glass, and I got relatively like in the straight line cuts, they cut about the same. They cut fine. I didn't have, I didn't see anything, but in the circle cuts, I don't know if we did definitely try the new glass on the circle cuts, because the one piece I remember, I was already doing the straight cut stuff. So I can't answer that question. There is a ripple in the old glass, which would make sense that if the surface is, waving and you're sliding your tool across it, then you would get varying kind of cuts or whatever, scores.
Were you putting oil on the scoring wheel?
No, we were gonna try that and then we got sidetracked.
Yeah, the oil will help a lot, because I can see in your score it's got a lot of kind of like chip out next to it, and putting oil on helps with that quite a bit.
It makes a cleaner cut, you mean?
Yeah, it'll make a cleaner score.
Well, I even found in my box, I have a glass cutter with the handle is an oil reservoir, and I thought it was just some nonsense, some QVC thing I picked up somewhere, so I didn't mess with it.
No, the oil helps a ton to keep it, because what's happening is as you're scoring, right, as you get these little lateral, like perpendicular chips, and then those perpendicular chips are where that crack is then taking a U-turn and going sideways. And so the cleaner the score, the less tendance it will be to kind of make like a U-turn on you.
Huh.
Yeah, right. I think that's the same principle why you're only supposed to score it once.
Yeah.
You don't go around twice, or
So I noticed you're keeping the glass stationary and moving the tool, and I don't want to be responsible for any lacerations here, but what if the glass was on some kind of a rotating platform and the tool was stationary? so that you could hold it with constant force while somebody turns the glass 360 degrees. Maybe it would prevent the foot from walking as much. I don't know.
I think the foot walking was a function of that suction cup sucks. In the compass that we built, we had about the same success with the one that we built, and I have a much, you know, a 2-inch suction cup with the lock mechanism all, and that never slid around, so that would kind of go away if we went to, you know, my compass. It's I don't know, it's an interesting theory. It does sound an awful lot like a cut open hand to me, though.
The octagon approach seems like a pretty good solution. And, you know, the truth is computers don't know curves either. So if you look real close, they're all just polygons at the bottom.
Yeah.
So speaking of really dangerous pastimes, is it correct that you're going to foreign countries, sitting down in the middle of a street and drawing the shape on a manhole cover?
You'd be surprised how many manhole covers are not in the middle of the street. But yes, I have a few that are weird, like half done, and then the crayon streaks because the car came, or, you know, and I usually have a wife and daughter to run lookout for me, which helps. I have a whole technique. If anybody's ever curious how to get a rubbing of a manhole cover, I've got a 12-step, 12-point presentation I can show you.
He used to have 2 daughters, but
I was gonna say, if Sandy ever bumps the life insurance policy up really high, you better be hoping Elida's looking out for you, because
Yeah, right.
give her some extra cookies or something. Yeah, and aside from harassing Davie, my goal is actually just cutting glass in general is always an interesting thing, because it's a thing that we totally take for granted, but it's in a lot of stuff, and it's not too often that I don't know, every time I've ever tried to cut it, it always ends up exploding, or it takes way more cuts than it should. So, and yet Richard, who's across the street from us over at Studio Perrin, he like is just, if you ever want to watch somebody do it correctly, all you have to do is go over and beg him, because he just like freehands it and then just like tap and it's done. And he's just, there was some UW students doing a challenge at the shop a long time ago, and they wanted to cut a circle. And so we didn't even, this is like the same thing. We didn't even try. We just like, Richard, here, there's this piece of glass. They want a circle out of it. So he just like draws a line with a pencil and follows the thing around and just taps on it, taps on it, taps on it. And he just made a circle. It was.
Oh, wow. Oh, I'd pay money to see that.
There's apparently some technique to it, but yeah, he was definitely oiling the wheel and doing just one real clean. He had the pressure just right. It seemed to be big.
Well, and I agree with it, what you started with, because I've cut kind of a bunch of glass in my life between breaking windows in my house, and like, you know, I make picture frames all the time for whatever. And so I've cut kind of a lot of glass compared to my brother, who also works on stuff all the time anyway. And the other night, it took me several wrong cuts just to get like the motion back down, just to, you know, because I was cutting too hard or too light or going cattywampus, and then, you know, and so it took me a while just to refigure that out of something that I once knew, I guess. So.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Anybody else got any questions for Davie? I want to see some more manhole rubbings. That's all. You just got to get a bigger crayon so you can do it in just a few swipes, and you'll be on your way.
There's probably 22 in my drawer over here. I could show you. Maybe next time I'll just put a slideshow together for everybody. So.
Cool.
Anybody else got anything they wanted to share? Nobody? I half threw Scott under the bus, but I figured he's busy with work. So, Scott, I volunteered you for talking about your little tiny penny stove, but you don't have to. It's all good.
Yeah, I'm not very prepared for that. Sorry, I didn't see that I was even thrown under the bus. That's how oblivious I am tonight. So.
It's all good. No worries. Well, cool. Anybody else got anything they wanted to talk about or share? Bob, you're killing me.
What's this about a giant 3D printer?
Yeah, actually, I did run and grab this thing. So this thing is the very first print. Does anybody know what it is?
It's Uranus.
That's no moon.
Shift knob.
Ooh.
So yeah, it's a big moon. It's actually really cool that somebody took I forget what the lunar probe is that took all the radar data, but they've got this like high resolution data online, and so somebody took it and turned it into a printable part, and you can see the first you can see the first defect right here where it shifted like probably like a half a millimeter or something towards the end of the print, and it's super visible. So this thing's like really twitchy to any kind of change in the printer at all. So yeah, that huge printer that's been sitting around, it's a Glacier ID3 printer, and it prints like, I don't know, probably 15 inches cubed. I mean, it's a pretty huge printer. This took like 35 hours to print. And that like wasn't too bad of a print time because gigantic things just take forever. I did scale this up to the limit of Simplify 3D. So Simplify 3D started to crash if I went over 1.5 times the size. So I have the G code rendered to make one more of these. And so at some point I will hit print, but it's kind of funny. So I did a little tiny test cube, and then I jumped immediately to a 29-hour print just to make sure the printer was working. I rebuilt it. I put a new extruder on it, put a new controller on it, and then rebuilt all the belt drives because they used the wrong kind of belt when they initially manufactured these things. And anyway, I set up the code and hit go, and it made this thing. And then at the end of the code said, go to Z 150 millimeters. And like on a regular printer, Z 150 millimeters is like send the platform all the way to the bottom, which would make sense. Just when you're done printing, push the platform all the way down, everything's okay. But when you print really big things, Z 150 is not very far down. In fact, it turns out that Z 150 is into the parts that you just got done printing. So this thing printed about 180 millimeters worth of material, and then while the nozzle was still hot, it plunged back down at Z 150 and parked itself to cool down on the bottom of the moon. So I am having to reprint one of these no matter what. But at any rate, it is an interesting way to remove prints. So if you freeze the part on the nozzle once it fully cools down, and then when you come back to it and you're like, what the hell's going on? And you turn the printer back on again, the first thing the printer does is go up. And so it just popped this thing right off the platform and then towed it over and bounced it off the wall and tipped it off the head. So that worked out good in the end, but not the ideal way to eject parts unless you really don't care about the top of your part.
That actually sounds better than the Thing-O-Matic feed belt.
It might work better. I guess you could print a tower on the top and then smash into it and then yank the part off that way. Maybe that's the way to go. At any rate, though, yeah, we do have the gigantic printer working. It works pretty good. I've printed precisely one thing on it, and then I was happy because it's been sitting here for, I don't know, 1.5 years. So I'm running out of machines to fix around here, though. So it's a good thing the pandemic is finally starting to subside, because I don't know what I'd do if I ran out of things to do. That wouldn't be good. I'd have to like go back to building the building or something. So I'd get bored doing that. At any rate, that's that guy's up and going, and then Davey will be excited to know that I did order a controller today. They're down to like $28 for a 32-bit controller. So jumping from an Arduino Mega to an actual 32-bit controller means that the steps and stuff can go a lot better. So I'm gonna fix the Lulzbot Mini for once and for all. So the Lulzbot Mini died quite a long time ago, and we tried fixing it, Davey and I did, and we couldn't quite get the board to work again. One of the stepper motor drivers died. So I don't know if anybody's looked at Marlin, which is the 3D printer firmware, but they released a 2.0 version a couple months back, and the 2.0 version incorporates a ton of stuff into like swapping tool heads and mixing colors and changing like probes and all sorts of stuff. So it's pretty neat. And that was one of the problems with this huge printer, is that because the bed is like this big, you can't make it level. It's just too big. And so you have to probe the bed in order to level the bed to print on. And so I put a bed probe on it, and it works pretty well. So that was the other required kind of innovation to make that thing work well, because it was just too hard otherwise to get it to work. So yeah, so yes, in short, the giant 3D printer lives again to, I guess, do massive prints that nobody needs. I will probably put a second head on it at some point with a much bigger nozzle, because this stuff takes forever with a small nozzle and printing big parts.
Oh my God, that reminds me of a story I wanted to tell. So we had a family member who needed to visit urgent care, and then urgent care said we needed to go to the ER. So I actually spent way too much time in the emergency department, and sitting there in this room kind of looking around at all the machines that go beep and everything. And then I realized that they have this crane thing that can is on a gantry that can be used to lift patients out of the bed or something like that. And I started looking at the gantry, and it's a full XY mechanism. There's rails down both sides of the room, and then a Y axis, and then the Z axis for lifting the patients. And I'm like, holy smokes, there's a full XYZ thing in here. I just need to build a tool head and find some material to extrude, and then co-opt this MyChart computer that's over in the corner, and I can turn this room into a 3D printer. And we were there for like 4 hours. So I was this close to doing that when the doctor walked in, and so we never did build the 3D printer. But I figured some of that foaming hand cleaner would make a nice thing if it would harden. You could just kind of build giant, benchies or something in the ER room there. That's how bored we were. I think I took a picture. I'll dig it up. You guys talk amongst yourselves. Oh no, that's right. It was too dark for some reason. The panoramic didn't work.
And what did the doctor say when you shared this with her?
I forget.
Oh.
She was not impressed.
You didn't get the orthopedic surgeon who's like the bone mechanic who would think that was cool.
They
You
would
got
have
the
dropped
wrong-
everything to help, I think.
You got the wrong person. It's all right. You could propose to put a chainsaw on the end of it and bring in some foam and see what they do.
Love it.
Could be good. All right. Anybody else got any hopefully not hospital stories to share?
I've got, there was some chatter in the text thread about some of my Madison stuff. And so I figured I'd share since I've got it. And so there's a few of them that I've completed, and this is one of my favorites. My brother happens to be gay and from Seattle. This Seattle actually has one of the coolest manhole covers. It's a 30 some inch. Can you see what I'm looking at? Can you see my
Yep, you're good.
rainbow?
Yep.
Okay. It's a 36-inch cover that is the grid. This is all the streets and the parks and such downtown Seattle. And then here next to the city, the seal of the city that's the port on the Bay of whatever that is.
Elliott Bay.
What was that?
Elliott Bay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so there's the Seattle one that's hanging in my brother's house. Here's the Madison one. The Madison actually has a really cool cover. This is sitting in my buddy's living room somewhere. And then one of my favorites was this one, which is part of what spawned the Circle Frame project, which is for, my brother's an avid biker. And so I made this, I got this one for him. And this was actually one of the coolest projects because for one, it was 18 degrees out and my 4-year-old daughter was asleep in a bike trailer. And then also the big technique I used for these is the neodymium magnets. And, because, manhole covers are cast iron. It's not a big deal. You stick it on there. Well, this came off the bike lock pedestal on the parking meters downtown, which are like pulled out of, 3/8 thick steel aluminum, the 3/8 thick aluminum, not steel. And so the magnets didn't work. It was cold as butt out. And at the top here, above the A and the O, and at the bottom in a similar place, there's these 2 tabs that come off that actually bolted to the frame. And so I actually had to do this rubbing, not fill in the top or bottom, rotate it like 45 degrees, and then continue that arc to get the clean circle that I wanted, all while my kid didn't die of hypothermia in the bike trailer next to me. So that was fun.
The story behind that Seattle manhole cover is that Seattle was settled along Elliott Bay in 3 different establishments, and the streets were lined parallel to the shore in the 3 different places. So none of the streets in downtown Seattle are all parallel to each other, but not to the adjoining grid.
Ah.
That's why.
Kansas City actually has the same thing where there's a 90 degree in the river, and Kansas City, Kansas put their streets this way, and Kansas City, Missouri put their streets this way. And so all's fine and dandy until you're trying to find 47th Street and you don't know if you're supposed to be in Kansas or Missouri.
I still think you need one of the like the classic Madison manhole cover that has the capital on it, like in kind of a two-tone, like a relief and a, oh yeah, that one. Oh, you have it. There you go.
My ticket to $1 million is to, if I can find a Bucky Badger red crayon, I think I can make $1 gajillion. I haven't found that yet. Haven't really looked that hard either.
You just don't want that money.
I think Dennis said it best, right? Have fun and make money too. I chuckled to myself. I don't know if anybody else caught that, but I thought that was kind of humorous.
At least enough to pay for the toys.
Yeah.
So I do have the rocket stove if you're interested in a very brief, or not the rocket stove, sorry, the penny stove if you're interested in a brief presentation on it.
As long as you promise not to burn down your house.
Just a laptop, I think, at this point.
Okay, well, the laptop's sacrificial. That's all right.
All right, so we recently did a 2-week family trip throughout the sort of desert Southwest, southern Colorado, southern Utah, and we drove, it was a road trip with camping, and it was very cold. But one of the experiments we did along the way was something I've always wanted to try to build. There's an internet community around these things called penny stoves. It's basically an alcohol stove made out of aluminum cans. And there's a ton of different designs of this thing. So this one's made out of like a Arizona iced tea can. This is a very simple design. They can get a lot more complicated, but we were working on basically the sort of field improvisable with a pocket knife and 2 aluminum cans kind of version of it. So if you can see, there's like little burner holes on the outside edge of this, and then a center hole that's a fill hole for fuel, and you put a penny over that to cover it. And I think there's really better designs of this that with a very little effort you could make a nicer stove. But so with this, we had 2 kind of Arizona iced tea, slightly bigger aluminum cans, but you can make it with, people make them with the smaller juice cans, people make it with the standard size 12-ounce cans. And then the fuel is basically alcohol, ethanol or methanol. So we use like the yellow heat, you can use red heat, you can use, some people use E85. You got to be a little careful if you do that. You can use not the 90 or 95% like rubbing alcohol as a fuel. So basically anything that's pretty much pure ethanol, methanol. And the idea is that the heat from the flames, you have to prime the thing. And then the heat from the flames vaporizes the alcohol. It's not an efficient burn when it's just liquid alcohol fire, but when it's alcohol vapor fire, it's more efficient. So the heat from the priming eventually vaporizes the alcohol enough to have actual burner flame. So I'll try it here. This is like, is that coming through okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, looks good.
The alcohol flame is almost invisible, but if you put some salt in it, maybe we'll be able to see it here. It burns a little bluer with that. And so it takes a little while for that kind of priming to happen. So on this one, you fill the top a bit as well. And even a little over the edge is fine. You know, this is like a fairly primitive camping stove is the idea. So the salt's gonna block my penny, but see if I can get some up in there to prime it. And I don't know if this was, yeah, I don't want to fill the whole thing up here in the kitchen, but we'll see how it goes. So probably can barely see that. What I'll do is I'll share an internet video of if I can find it.
I was gonna say the top of the flame there. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Because the black, yeah, I think your cookie sheet's got a bit of a fire going there.
Yeah, the idea is you prime it. You actually do, you spray it around and it primes. the heat. So, and then the penny is sealing that middle fill hole so that the vapor comes out the side. So it'll take a little while for this to get warmed up, but there you see it start to become a burner. There. So the salt is making that flame yellower than what it would be. I don't know if you can really see that well, but we boiled 3 cups of water with a stove like this filled probably half full, 3 cups of really cold water. You need, for this style of stove, you need to put a little frame, and you want to get the pot about an inch from it. But there you can see the burner. The middle, again, the salt is kind of keeping that penny lifted a little, so it's still flaming in the middle. But normally that would, once that priming charge is kind of burned off, it's just the flame of the stove itself. So there, if the laptop melts, then I'll stop. So it actually does end up burning even more of a flame than that. So
Scott, have you tried it without the penny?
There are designs that don't use a penny.
Yeah.
That have a kind of an open center that vapors up the side, but you need to cut a specific radius of the aluminum piece out of the can to kind of wrap the metal of that.
Even with this design, you would still be the vapor would still be going out the center, right? I mean, I just wonder if you
and the middle, it would go out. It's gonna heat fine coming out with the middle. That's not really much of a problem. But yeah, so if I move the penny, there you see, if you can see that, it's like one big flame and the side burners went way down. Is that coming through okay?
Maybe it's not quite as efficient.
Yeah, I don't know. It's probably like people like the looks of the burner will look a little better.
I have seen ultralight backpackers use this type of stove, and I've made one similar too. But what they then do is take like 3 titanium stakes, like tent stakes.
Yeah.
You make a little tripod around it so that you can just place your pot. So your whole setup is ultralight.
Yeah. So it is. It's a very light stove. It's sort of, this one you could easily improvise in the field with just an awl and a scissors and a knife, or even just a regular knife if you were really, relatively careful. But it's literally just the 2 sides of a can cut off, and you do a little metal shrinking on the one to fit it in the other, and you poke holes in it. So that's it basically. And then you need some fuel. We were trying to run it on 70% hand sanitizer because I was just kind of curious if that would work. But I think you need something more like 95% ethanol or methanol to make it go. Shutting them off is a bit of a trick. Some people take yet another bottom and they make a dowser for it or whatever, but I'll just put a pot over it here to snuff it. So yeah, questions on any of that? Certainly not an expert. We had some fun doing it as a family. We use a thumbtack to poke the right side to roughly the right size, like burner holes for that. And if you look on the YouTube, the internet, anywhere, you'll find 100 opinions on the best one and how to make them, and templates as fancy as you want to get, basically.
Your boys are really becoming makers and getting some good inspiration from their dad, huh?
Yeah, they had fun with this one, actually. It's kind of like we've got these very basic parts. Can we make can we boil water? That which is kind of a fun experiment.
That's awesome.
The freezing fingers were probably a motivating factor, but we don't need to get into the torture.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'd be curious, Scott, if you do a side-by-side, same amount of water, and then just have a cup of burning alcohol versus a burner, which one is it? Because is it faster, or is it just are you using the same amount of fuel, but it just does it in a faster rate, or is there any difference?
I'm led to believe it's more efficient, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I've got an MSR ultralight, 25 years old or whatever, and they vaporize. I think you get better flames, so it's more direct and probably a hotter heat than just that burning. But it'd be an easy enough thing to try.
Okay, I'm just gonna constantly sprint.
Yeah, I think the pool fire, you just end up with a lot reduced efficiency because you don't have enough oxygen reaching it. Versus this, you've got oxygen all the way around the flame and all flame sites. So you get better, which is why, I mean, if you think about it that way too, it's the same reason why your burner for a stove or anything else is distributed, is partially to distribute heat evenly, but also to get enough oxygen, because you can't get the oxygen through the pot to get to the middle, anymore. So trying to put those at the edge around a perimeter and kind of aim them sideways, that allows you to get oxygen into your flame to make sure that you're burning at stoichiometric rather than a reduction flame.
I'm recommending for the next trip that you level the boys up and make this wood gasifier, backpacking gasifier, which you can make with a couple of tin cans, like a coffee can and a smaller can inside. More power, only like a little bit more complex. I think they can do it.
I think
We did make a rocket stove out of a big bean can and a little can years ago. Then that was also a sort of not field improvised, because there's some insulation to the thing that's kind of important. People do put fiberglass wicks into these too. So if it wicks up, that's slightly better, but we didn't have that for this, and it ended up burning fine. But yeah, no, that stove is great. We still do use that from time to time.
I did a gasifier stove here, and I think I did the demonstration, but it was really easy to do. The hardest thing was finding cans the right size for what you need.
Yeah, you got to eat a lot of beans. That's my experience.
Yeah, or we don't drink coffee, so we don't have any number 10 cans to make a big one.
Oh,
But that's nice because the stick, it's like you can gather enough fuel to run the thing for 20 minutes in like 30 seconds in your yard.
Yeah, and then we could pack stuff inside of the stove too and not have to carry fuel.
At some point, you'll reach the Bronze Age in your camping trips, and then things will get a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have wanted to smelt copper, but that's a few trips away probably.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing, Scott. Sorry to put you on the spot, but
I will say another cool thing is the ready availability of the fuel. Like almost every gas station has those yellow or red heat cans. And although I didn't find the 85, I didn't use the 85. Like if you really wanted a cheap fuel, people say it burns a little volatile at first, but E85 is 85% ethanol. So you do need to be a bit careful with it, but it's extremely cheap fuel to run a stove like this if you were, improvising sort of boiled water or whatever.
Cool. Thanks, Scott.
Anybody else got anything they wanted to share?
I can do a super short one, unplanned demo, but Davie got me thinking about curved wood. So I'm on a multi-month project right now to try to prep for a baby without buying anything, because my husband and I are expecting and feel like a lot of things get purchased. There's like a lot of like production and consumption when it comes to like prepping for a kid. And so we have been trying to see like how far can we get, how far can we get without like spending $1. So we've been doing a lot of participation in the Madison free economy, making space in our tiny house by shoving stuff out to that free economy. Our porch pretty much always has something on it right now. And then also making use of all the other like-minded people who want to see their items go on to have a longer life. So one of the things that I picked up from the Madison Buy Nothing Group was one of these infant stimulation mobiles. I'm pretty much expecting that this kid is going to come out with a Meyer brain, which we know is going to need like a lot of stimulation, or else it's going to, kid's going to be crazy. So we picked this up, and it comes with like a little plastic mobile attachment thing, and the plastic piece was broken. So the way that it's like supposed to have a clampy thing and then a hangy thing, and these little cards that are supposed to make your baby's brain be enriched are supposed to hang from that. And these plastic curvy bits came broken so that the little cards couldn't attach to them. So really like the only functional piece was just the cards themselves. So again, in the spirit of not buying anything, we looked around the house to see like, what do we already have that we could like get rid of and then not have in storage anymore that would work for this thing. And it turns out that I have been in the past way over ambitious about the amount of embroidery that I'm interested in. Embroidery is like slow and tedious. So I don't do a lot of it, but I have a large stock of embroidery hoops. So I had a couple that were like exactly the same size as the parts that came with this. So the next challenge was just to figure out like, okay, how do we get them from a circle to a semicircle so that it's just something that you can hang from. And that it's a good thing that I had a lot of embroidery hoops because I had to go through a couple pieces trying to figure that out. It turns out that these things are, I should have known this, they're like plywood. They are like little layers of wood. It's not a solid piece of wood that they're made from, which makes sense because how else would you get them to curve so nicely? But they don't like saws for that reason. If you try to saw an embroidery hoop, it splinters into 1,000 pieces and then you walk on them in your sock feet and you've got splinters in your feet and it's just no good. So had to experiment with some different options for cutting them. Again, with the constraint of not wanting to leave the house or buy anything, it ended up being that just like sitting patiently with a utility knife was the easiest way to get through these things. So cut through them with a utility knife and then needed to find some way to attach something to them that these little cards could clip onto. There's lots of different cards. Your baby's going to get bored if you show them the same card all the time. So these are supposed to be able to go on and off using these little triangle holes on the card. So I was trying to think, what can I attach to my semicircle of an embroidery hoop that is the right size for these little triangles to snap onto and snap off of pretty easily. So I went through my bead collection and I found out that I didn't have any beads that were an appropriate size. So those went to the porch and they went to the Madison Free Economy. I don't really do beading anymore, so that was good. I looked around to see if we had any tiny screws that would be around the right size, but we didn't really have anything that had a small enough head. And if it had, even if it had like a head that would work, those embroidery hoops are not very thick and we don't really want a sharp pointy screw bit, like the pointy end of the screw hanging over the place where the baby is going to be laying, because I'm not that like good of a crafts person. And what happens when it falls on them? And then there's like the pointy screw bit down there. So ended up going in a sewing direction. I used hook and eye closures, like the little things that you would finish a dress with that you can clip together. And I didn't find a YouTube picture of those, but I can just show you. Drilled some holes, drilled a couple holes in the embroidery hoop and just sewed those little hook and eye closures to it. And they are just the right size. And now this can hang above our diaper changing pad and hopefully minimize the amount of screaming that occurs during that parenting ritual. So not very makery, but I thought it's in the spirit of the group to try to make do with what you have, reuse things that you have around to get to a functional thing. So that's all.
Can you make another like 20 or 30 of those so I can hang them above each machine? And that way people like go to use the drill press and then just kind of get distracted by the hanging thing. And
yeah, there we go.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. It's neat to hear too about the recycling of materials that's going on in Madison.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Nick's on that group too. I see you sometimes, Nick. There's that Buy Nothing East Side Madison group is pretty robust. If you're not there,
Yeah,
that's a good place to be.
it's up to a point. Nobody had a CD player they wanted to give away, so I ended up having to buy one. I should have put that out on this list.
yeah, I may have had a CD player for you, but too late now, it sounds like.
Well, I just went back to Amazon, but there it is.
Well, cool. Thanks for sharing, Sarah. Better than throwing stuff in the trash, and certainly an improvement over plastic stuff everywhere. So now you can pass it along to somebody else and it'll actually last another 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when it's not made out of plastic.
Oh, how am I not surprised that there's a massive spreadsheet that goes along with this?
Yeah, I'll brag up my spreadsheet and say we are not going to succeed in buying nothing. Obviously, there's some things that you have to buy new, like for safety reasons. You know, we're not going to get a used car seat and whatnot. But we're about 5%. We're about like we're spending at like a 5% rate per value that we're getting back through my hoarding accumulations. So not bad. It does work.
That's amazing.
That's more money to go into the college fund.
What was that top category name? Did I see that right?
The baby containment.
Baby containment. Okay, just making sure I read that right.
Amazon didn't have a better term for that, and I think it's accurate, right? Like you got to contain them all the time some way or another. So all the containment items are lumped under.
Child-proofing. They call that
That
child.
include diapers?
Grown-ups call it boundary setting.
Oh, there you go. I need some of those too. Could we do boundary setting gates? Just just put some stuff up.
Boundary setting, Bob, right now diapering is a separate category, but if you've got a cute, better name for that, I would, baby excrement containment, yeah.
Waste management.
Crap.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
I think we should start, how the anti-maskers have the, you can't breathe through the mask thing. We should start a thing of babies can't breathe through the diaper. So they really need, perforated diapers if you don't want your child to suffer.
Or no diapers.
Where are you putting the diapers on your children, Chris?
No, I'm saying precisely that, since everybody's so attached to we got to make mesh masks because we can't breathe. I think we got to get all the childcare people on this crazy pathway to oh, the baby's butt can't breathe. So it needs perforated diapers in order for all this to work. So I just want to see how far afield you can drive people before they finally have this realization of the insanity.
Yeah. Diapers infringe on their freedom.
That's what I'm saying. Just gotta push hard.
We don't want to be sheep that live in fear of crap and piss.
There it is. All right, you go forth and promote our theories. It'll be good.
I'm just the idea man.
It's good. Somebody's got to be the pitch person. Well, cool. Anybody else have anything? Otherwise, we can call it a early nice night, and hopefully next month we can have some more inspirational ideas. Now that it'll be time to plant things. Although it's probably already time to plant things, but I think next week maybe we'll get another frost. So have to see.
Yeah, we got our starts going in the front window. They're about 4 inches tall already.
We put Jim made this little geodesic ball as a prototype greenhouse, and it's yay big around, and we put it on top of the rhubarb that's out in the garden, and the rhubarb is it's 8-9 inches tall now, and 4 leaves coming up. And last year, the whole year, it was 1 leaf. I think we got 2 little teeny tiny stalks of rhubarb off of it. So this is a start last year.
Probably covering our rhubarb then.
But yeah, it's doing pretty good. Well, cool. All right, it's good to see everybody. Thanks for coming. And
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, wait to see everybody.
See ya.